I feel like for the last 5 years or so, I've been in some kind of weird body weight limbo where I haven't really been able to gain a substantial amount of weight. And when I say substantial, I'm referring to about 25 pounds or more. Anybody who I discuss this with typically has little to no sympathy for me, and I completely get it because most people have the opposite issue and they are trying to lose weight. I've always had trouble gaining weight, and when I say weight, obviously I'm referring to muscle mass and not body fat. Although I think even if I wanted to gain body fat, I'd probably still have a hard time gaining a substantial amount of it. But I really have no reason to put on body fat unless maybe I was considering pursuing a career in sumo wrestling, which someday might be a viable option, but right now that's just not really my objective. I work with many personal training clients, and the majority of them tend to want to lose body fat. I know how to get them to lose the body fat and what they need to do, but it's almost a little bit difficult because I've actually never really been in their shoes. Most of my life, I've been trying to gain weight, particularly the last 2 decades, and I can really only think of maybe 2 times where I was trying to cut weight and reduce my body fat. The last time I tried to do this was sometime last year where I went on about a 5 to 6 month weight cut where I ended up dropping about 13 pounds. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot of weight, but the thing is, I was already fairly lean to begin with, so I wasn't looking to lose a lot of weight. And I'd say 99% of what I lost was body fat. So losing 13 pounds of body fat is pretty good. And that brought my body fat percentage to maybe like 9 or 10%, which is very lean and is as lean as I wanted to go. Because I know if I tried to go any lower, I'd end up just starting to risk losing a bunch of muscle mass and strength, which I don't really want to. So around the beginning of this year, I decided to go back on a bulk, or basically trying to gain weight again. And I've put on probably about 15 pounds since the end of the weight cut, but I seem to be stuck around that 230-pound mark. And for the life of me, I can't seem to really get past it. I've been tracking my calories for the last 4 to 5, probably closer to 5 months, so that I know I'm eating enough calories and that I'm in a caloric surplus. I try to get over 4,000 calories a day. That number is actually closer to probably about 4,200 calories. And I really try to get at least 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein. As far as the fats and the carbohydrates, I'm a little less concerned with them. I usually try to shoot for somewhere between 0.3 grams to 0.5 grams of fat per pound of body weight. And then the rest of the leftover calories comes from carbohydrates. Again, hitting that protein requirement and the calorie requirement is what's most important to me. And then the fats and the carbs are not as important. Usually the fat the ratio tends to be quite a bit higher than the carbohydrates. But I know I should be in a caloric surplus, yet for some reason I don't seem to be really gaining weight, which is completely baffling me, because if you're in a caloric surplus, meaning you're consuming more calories than you're expending, you have to be gaining weight. And although I am pretty physically active, since I work out 4 to 5 times a week, lifting weights, I try to grapple 2 to 3 times a week. I do some pretty intense physical activity, so I am burning quite a bit of calories, but still I shouldn't be in a deficit, because eating over 4,000 calories a day is a lot. And even though my BMR is pretty high, it's about 2,600 calories, I should still be in a surplus. And if you're not aware of BMR, means that's your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories you're burning basically per day just being at rest. And the reason I know this number is because I've had in-body measurements that have calculated to around 2,600. which is pretty high. It's higher than most people just because they have more muscle mass than most people, and the more muscle mass you have, the higher your BMR is going to be. That is the main determinant of BMR, and there are a few other things that determine it. So going into basically your total daily energy expenditure, also known as your maintenance calories, this is the number of calories you need to eat per day in order to maintain your weight. And that's comprised of a few different components. The first one of the big ones again, is your BMR. Then you have thermo effect of food, which is basically the amount of calories you burn through digesting, absorbing, having your body use the food you eat, which makes up roughly 5 to 10% probably of your daily caloric expenditure. And again, that's going to also depend on what's your proportion of macronutrients, as protein requires a lot more energy to digest than carbohydrates, and carbohydrates require significantly more amount of energy, thus using more calories than fat. So if you're eating a higher percentage of protein, you're basically going to be burning more calories than you would be if you're eating a higher percentage of fat. Again, thermo effect of food doesn't really comprise that much of your total daily energy expenditure, so I don't even usually calculate that into figuring out my TDEE. Then the other two important components of figuring out your total daily energy expenditure besides the BMR is your EAT, which is your exercise activity thermogenesis, and your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So EAT, or again, exercise activity thermogenesis, is how many calories you're burning per day through structured exercise. So lifting weights at the gym, for example, would count towards that. Running on a treadmill would count towards that. And then the NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is basically the calories you burn throughout the day doing activities of daily living. So walking, washing your clothes, cleaning your house, stuff like that. Any type of activity that isn't considered structured exercise would go towards that. So then you take your BMR, your NEAT, and your EAT, and you add that together, and that's going to give you your total daily energy expenditure. And then if you want to gain weight, you're going to want to be eating more calories than that number, so you're in a caloric surplus. And if you want to lose weight, you're going to be eating less calories than that number, so you're in a caloric deficit. So again, using all these calculations, I should be well into a pretty high caloric surplus, yet I am still just been stagnant as far as my weight gain. So what I'm thinking is I might have to start going on what they call a dirty bulk, which is eating more junk, or basically foods that are more calorically dense, such as ice cream, cookies, things along those lines. I don't want to eat too much of that stuff because, again, I want most of my calories to be from clean, healthy food sources. But in order to, some days, just to get enough calories, I gotta eat stuff like cookies or whatever. So I just don't want that to be the primary component of my diet. I still want most of my calories coming from healthy food sources. Anyway, basically, I know there's some people out there that can relate to what I've gone through. I have made huge transformations in my body over the last 20 years since I really got into strength training and nutrition about 20 years ago. But again, the last 4 to 5 years, I feel like I've been very stagnant as far as making changes in my body. So I'd love to hear from you guys if there's anybody else who feels like they just can't gain weight, and usually it's more men that have this issue because they're usually the ones trying to put on weight. Women generally not so much. And if you've had this issue, is it like anything you've done to rectify it? Because I do know a lot about exercise and nutrition, but I don't know everything, and maybe there's something out there that I'm missing that could potentially help me. Also, if you're in the opposite position and you're trying to lose weight, let me know how that's going. I have helped quite a few people lose a significant amount of weight, so I am quite knowledgeable on that as well. And just feel free to leave that stuff in the comments. So that's all I got for this video. Until next time, stay strong, warriors.